Be me, Daniel. 26, freelance storyboard artist for local commercials, mostly drawing awful car dealership mascots, living in a cramped townhouse that smells faintly of old wood. For 2 years, my life has been a quiet, padded room, because 3 years ago I met Monique. Monique was not a hurricane. Hurricanes are loud and obvious, and you can board up the windows. Monique was black mold. She just quietly ruined the foundation while pretending to be an air purifier. She would start an argument about how I folded the towels, and somehow, by the end of it, I was apologizing for my childhood. She didn't yell. She just looked at me like I was a disappointing stray dog. Eventually, she left me, said I didn't have enough drive. She moved in with a guy named Sebastian, who sold metabolic coaching on Instagram. He wore a lot of tank tops and yelled at his phone camera in his car. I didn't fight it. I was so tired, my bones felt hollow. I spent 2 years doing nothing but drawing storyboards, buying groceries at off hours to avoid crowds, learning how to sit on my couch without feeling like I was doing something wrong. I bought a ficus plant. It died immediately. I kept the dead sticks in the pot for 6 months because I felt bad throwing it out. That was my emotional state. Finally, my buddy Robert came over. He looked at the dead stick in the dirt, looked at me in my sweatpants at 2 in the afternoon, told me I was turning into a sad ghost, forced me to download Tinder. I hated it immediately. Everyone was yelling through their pictures, jumping off boats, holding giant fish, drinking out of fish bowls in crowded clubs. I just wanted to go back to sleep. Then I saw Helene. Her main picture was her standing in a kitchen, wearing a giant green sweater that was swallowing her hands, holding a baking sheet with a completely charred loaf of bread on it. She was looking at the camera with this expression of profound defeat. No makeup, hair falling out of a messy clip. Her bio said she was a museum archivist, said she preferred quiet places and bad historical movies, said coffee was a safer bet than bars, because nobody yells in a coffee shop, unless they get the wrong milk. I swiped right. My phone buzzed immediately. We matched. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes trying to think of a first message. I typed out, "Hey," deleted it. Typed out, "Do you always burn bread?" Deleted it because it sounded mean. Finally sent a message asking if the bread survived. She replied 3 minutes later, said the bread was currently being used as a doorstop. We talked for 2 weeks. No games. No weird waiting periods between texts. Just long, rambling paragraphs about how terrible modern couches are, how grocery store tomatoes taste like wet paper, how the local news anchors always look like they're being held hostage. She was funny, but in a really tired way, like someone who just wanted to sit down. I realized I was checking my phone constantly, smiling at my kitchen counter like an idiot. I finally asked if she wanted to meet, suggested the indoor botanical gardens downtown, neutral ground, lots of plants. Nobody expects you to be cool around a fern, she agreed enthusiastically, said she had a membership, but mostly just went to look at the moss. Thursday rolls around. I am sweating through my gray button-down shirt. I change into a flannel. Decide that looks like I am trying to chop wood. Change into a plain black t-shirt and my least ruined jacket. Drive my ancient Subaru out back to the gardens. The passenger door is permanently jammed. I have to park 3 blocks away because the lot is full of school buses. Walk in the miserable drizzle to the main entrance. She is already there, standing near the ticket booth. She looks exactly like her pictures. Petite, thick-framed glasses slipping down her nose, wearing a brown cardigan over a faded band shirt. She waves at me awkwardly, almost drops her phone. I walk over and say, "Hey, you're Helene." She says yes, and I am mostly dry. We stare at each other for a second. I say, "I'm Daniel." She smiles, and it reaches her eyes. It's a nice smile. We walk to the ticket counter. The guy behind the glass looks like he hates leaves. I ask for 1 adult ticket. She tries to hand him her membership card. She drops the card. It slides under the little glass partition gap. The guy stares at it. She stares at it. I reach my fingers under the glass and try to pinch it. I can't reach. Helene apologizes to the guy. The guy slowly slides it back with a pen. We walk into the tropical dome. It is instantly 90 degrees and 80% humidity. My glasses fog up completely. I take them off and wipe them on my shirt. She laughs quietly. We start walking down the winding dirt path, surrounded by giant, monstrous palm trees and orchids. It smells like wet dirt and old water. It's strangely comforting. We talk about her job. She works in the basement of the Historical Society, cataloging old letters and terrible diary entries from the 1800s. She tells me about a guy from 1840 who wrote 30 pages about his neighbor's ugly horse. I tell her about my storyboard job, how I have to draw local lawyers looking powerful in front of fake courthouses. She snorts. We dodge a group of screaming toddlers on a field trip. We find a quiet bench near a waterfall feature. The water sounds nice. I feel my shoulders drop for the first time in weeks. I am not worried about saying the wrong thing. She's picking at a loose thread on her cardigan. We start talking about the upcoming holidays. Thanksgiving is a month away. I say I usually just make a small turkey breast and watch football alone. She sighs heavily, adjusts her glasses, says she dreads the holidays. Says her extended family is completely exhausting. She says everyone is always shouting over each other. But there is one cousin who is the absolute worst. She says this cousin turns every single family gathering into a one-woman play, where she is both the victim and the hero. I smile a little bit. I say I totally get it. I say I dated someone exactly like that. Someone who could make a dropped fork feel like a personal attack on her soul. Helene shakes her head, says her cousin is next level. Says her cousin once faked a severe peanut allergy because she was mad at a waiter. My brain stops, just a complete hard stop, like someone pulled the plug on a television. I look at her. The sound of the indoor waterfall suddenly seems incredibly loud. I swallow hard. My mouth is completely dry. I say carefully, "Was this at an Italian place on 4th Street?" Helene freezes. Her hand is still holding the loose thread on her sweater. She looks at me. Her eyes are wide. She says yes, very slowly. I feel a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. I say, did she claim her throat was closing up? Did she demand the manager, but somehow miraculously recover the exact second they comped a $90 bottle of wine? Helene is staring at me like I just told her the exact date of her death. She drops the thread. She whispers, "Oh my God." She says, "You're Daniel." She says, "You're the guy who used to draw the little cartoons on her lunch bags." I stare at the dirt path. I say, "And your cousin, the one who makes everyone miserable, is Monique." We sit there on the wooden bench, two people in a fake jungle sweating in our winter clothes. The silence stretches out for what feels like an hour. A woman walks by pushing a stroller and glares at us for being in the way. Neither of us notices. Helene puts her face in her hands. She mutters, "Oh, this is terrible. This is the worst thing that has ever happened in a greenhouse. I don't know what to do. My instinct is to run. My instinct is to sprint out of the botanical gardens, get in my Subaru with the jammed door, drive to another state, change my name to Craig and become a night watchman." But I look at her. She looks so completely mortified. She looks up from her hands. Her face is flushed. She says, "I am so incredibly sorry, Daniel." She says, "If I had any idea, I swear I wouldn't have matched with you. I wouldn't have brought you here." She starts rambling, saying she can just leave, saying she'll cover the ticket. She starts digging in her purse for her wallet. She looks panicked. I reach out and gently touch her wrist. She stops digging. I say, "Don't apologize." I say Monique never talked about her family. She just vaguely mentioned having a cousin who was boring because she liked books. Helene lets out a sharp, loud snort. She covers her mouth. She says, "Yep, that sounds exactly like her." She says boring is Monique's favorite word for anyone who doesn't worship her. We sit back against the bench. The panic in my chest starts to subside, replaced by this bizarre, surreal feeling, like finding out you and a stranger survived the same specific plane crash. Helene looks at the waterfall. She says quietly, "She bragged about you, you know. She talked about how much you did for her, how you paid for almost everything, how easy it was to get you to change your plans if she just sighed loudly enough." She said it like it was a skill she had mastered. My stomach twists. It hurts to hear, but it also feels like a massive weight lifting off my ribs. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making it up. Someone else saw it. Her own family saw it. I look at Helene. I say she told me I was suffocating her because I asked her to text me when she got home late. Helene rolls her eyes hard. She says Monique literally keyed a guy's truck in college because he went to Denny's without her. I let out a laugh. A real, genuine, loud laugh. It echoes in the dome. A guy looking at a fern shushes me. I don't care. Helene smiles. The awkwardness is completely gone, replaced by the gritty reality of shared survival. She looks at me. She says so. What happens now? She says this is weird, right? This is objectively a very weird situation. I look at her messy hair, her glasses, the way she's nervously tapping her foot. I say I really don't want Monique to ruin another good thing in my life. I say I'm having a really nice time with you. But if this is too weird for you, I completely understand. Helene looks at her lap. She taps her fingers against her purse. She looks up at me with this completely deadpan, sincere face. She says I have a half-gallon of spiked apple cider in my fridge at home. She says we need to go somewhere quiet and process this entire nightmare like adults. I say I have a townhouse 10 minutes away, and I was planning to make baked ziti tonight. She stands up. She says, "Let's go buy cheese." We leave the botanical gardens. The walk back to my car is completely different. We are talking fast now, trading Monique horror stories like war medals. I tell her about the time Monique threw my favorite mug away because the color yellow gave her anxiety. Helene tells me about the time Monique wore a white gown to their aunt's wedding and claimed it was eggshell. We get to my car. I remember the passenger door is jammed. I wince. I say, "Hey, so my car is a piece of garbage. You have to get in through the driver's side and climb over the center console." Helene doesn't even blink. She says I respect a car that makes you work for it. She climbs awkwardly over the driver's seat. Her boot kicks the gear shift. She apologizes. She gets settled in the passenger seat. I get in. I start the car. The belt squeals loudly. We drive to the grocery store. We walk down the pasta aisle. We are debating which brand of ricotta cheese to buy. I say the store brand is fine. She looks at me like I just insulted her ancestors. She says store brand ricotta is just sad milk, Daniel. She says we are buying the good ricotta. We are traumatized adults, and we deserve the good ricotta. She throws the expensive plastic tub into the handbasket. We go to the self-checkout. I scan the ziti. I scan the cheese. I scan the crushed tomatoes. The machine yells at me, says unexpected item in the bagging area. I stare at it. Helene says the machine knows about Monique. The machine is judging us. The tired teenager working the self-checkout lane shambles over. He scans his little barcode badge. He doesn't say a word. He walks away. We bag our stuff. We drive back to my townhouse. I unlock the front door. I am suddenly hyper-aware of my living space. It is very clean but very sparse. My dead ficus is still in the corner. Helene takes off her coat. She looks at the dead sticks in the dirt. She points at it. She says, "What is his name?" I say he doesn't have a name. He's been dead since March. She nods solemnly. She says he fought bravely. We go into the kitchen. I pull out the cutting board. She insists on chopping the onions. She says chopping onions is good for aggressive feelings. We stand shoulder to shoulder in my narrow kitchen. I am boiling the water. She is chopping. Her eyes are watering furiously from the onions. She keeps wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. She looks like a raccoon. We are laughing about a time Monique tried to start a podcast about authenticity. I tell her Monique bought $300 worth of microphones and recorded one episode where she mostly complained about traffic. Helene is laughing so hard she has to put the knife down. She says the podcast was called Speaking My Truth. I say I know I was the one who had to design the logo. She covers her face and groans. The water boils over. It sizzles loudly on the electric burner. I panic and grab a dish towel. I try to move the pot. I knock over a plastic cup of water on the counter. It spills everywhere. It drips down the cabinets. I am frantically wiping it up. I say I am so sorry. I am an idiot. I am usually completely capable of boiling water. Helene just grabs paper towels and starts helping me wipe the floor. She is on her hands and knees in my kitchen laughing. She says, "Daniel, it is literally just water." She says you don't have to apologize for spilling water. I freeze, holding a wet paper towel. I realize I had entirely tensed up. I was expecting her to sigh loudly. I was expecting her to roll her eyes and say I ruined the evening, but she didn't. She just helped me clean it up. She stands up and throws the wet towels in the trash. She looks at me. She says, "Hey." I look at her. She says, "You're safe here." She says it as a joke, but her voice is soft. I swallow the lump in my throat. I say I know. We finish making the ziti. I pull the heavy glass casserole dish out of the oven. It smells amazing. The cheese is perfectly browned on top. She says, "See, this is what happens when you respect the ricotta." I grab 2 plates. We sit on the couch. The couch is small. There is a weird gap between the cushions that swallows remotes. She sits on one side. I sit on the other. We put on a terrible action movie from the 90s. The one where the guy has to disarm a bomb on a bus. We eat the ziti. It is actually incredible. We talk over the entire movie. We point out plot holes. We talk about how the main character's haircut makes no sense. At some point, I realize we haven't mentioned Monique in 2 hours. The ghost is gone. The room just feels like a room. Helene finishes her plate. She sets it on the coffee table next to a stack of old mail. She pulls her knees up to her chest. She yawns. It is almost 11 p.m. She says she should probably call an Uber. She says her car is still at the botanical gardens. I say I can drive you back to your car. She looks out the window. It is pouring rain now. Thick, heavy sheets of rain slapping the glass. She groans. She says, I really don't want to climb back through your car window in the rain. I laugh. I say you can stay if you want. I say I have a spare bedroom that is currently storing a broken printer and some cardboard boxes. But the couch pulls out into a bed. I say I am not trying to be weird. I say I just don't want you to be miserable in the rain. She looks at me. She looks at the rain. She smiles. She says I would love to sleep on your weird couch. I get up and get blankets. I bring out a heavy quilt my mom made. I bring out 2 flat pillows. I hand her one of my old college t-shirts to sleep in. She goes to the bathroom to change. I stand in the living room feeling completely overwhelmed. In a good way. In a way I haven't felt in years. She comes out wearing the shirt. It hangs down to her knees. She looks ridiculous. She looks beautiful. She sits on the edge of the pull-out bed. I am standing near the kitchen island. I am rambling about something stupid. I am talking about how the city is supposed to fix the potholes on my street. I realize I am talking too much. I realize I am just staring at her. She looks up at me. She says, "You're staring, Daniel." I say, I know I'm sorry. I say, I just can't believe today actually happened. She pats the spot next to her on the mattress. I walk over and sit down. The springs creak loudly. We are sitting very close. I can smell her shampoo. It smells like green apples. She turns her head. She looks at me without the sarcastic shield. She leans in. She kisses me. It is not a messy, desperate movie kiss. It is slow. It is careful. It is completely sure of itself. She pulls back a few inches. She smiles. She says, I'm really glad I burned that bread. I laugh against her forehead. I say me too. I tell her goodnight. I go into my bedroom. I leave the door cracked open. I lie in my bed staring at the ceiling. I hear her shifting on the squeaky couch. I hear the rain outside. I feel completely at peace. I fall asleep. I wake up suddenly. My room is dark. I look at my alarm clock. It is 2:30 in the morning. My phone is vibrating on the nightstand. It is rattling against a half-empty water glass. I roll over groggily. I grab the phone. The screen brightness burns my retinas. I squint at it. It is a text message. The name at the top says Monique. My blood instantly turns to ice. My heart starts hammering against my ribs. I haven't seen that name on my phone in 2 years. I open the message. It says, Hey Daniel, I know it's been a really long time. Sebastian and I broke up. He was too obsessed with his macros. I was remembering how you always made sure my car had gas. You always made me feel safe. I miss that. Call me tomorrow? I stare at the words. I read them 3 times. I can hear her voice in my head, that soft, manipulating tone she used when she wanted something. 2 years ago, this text would have destroyed me. 2 years ago, I would have thrown up in the bathroom sink. I would have agonized over a reply for 4 hours. I look toward my bedroom door. I look at the crack of light coming from the street lamp outside. I can hear the quiet, steady sound of Helene breathing in the living room. Helene is asleep on my terrible couch wearing my old shirt. Helene helped me wipe up spilled water without making me feel stupid. I look back at the phone. I do not feel sick. I do not feel panicked. I feel absolutely nothing for Monique. It is just words on a screen. I tap her name. I scroll down. I hit block contact. The phone asks if I am sure. I hit yes. I put the phone face down on the nightstand. I lie back on my pillows. I pull the blanket up. I close my eyes. I go right back to sleep. The next morning I wake up at 7. The smell of coffee is drifting into my room. I put on sweatpants and walk out. Helene is in the kitchen. She is wearing her jeans and my t-shirt. She is pouring coffee into a mug that says, World's Okayest Brother. She looks over and smiles. She says morning. She says I had to dig through your cabinets to find the coffee filters. She says you have 4 jars of garlic powder. Why do you have 4 jars? I rub my eyes. I say I keep forgetting I have it when I go to the store. She shakes her head. She hands me a mug. She says, I have to go to work. She says the Historical Society waits for no man. She says, I ordered an Uber. It will be here in 5 minutes. I say, I can drive you to your car later. She says, deal. She grabs her purse. She puts on her shoes. She stands at the door. She looks suddenly nervous again. She says she says this was really great. She says despite the massive family trauma revelation. I walk over to the door. I say it was the best date I've ever been on. She blushes. She leans up and kisses me quickly. She says I will text you. She walks out the door. She gets in the Uber. I lock the door. I turn around. I see her brown cardigan sitting on the arm of the couch. She left her sweater. I walk over and pick it up. It smells like her. I smile. I decide I will take it to her at work during my lunch break. I spend the morning drawing a storyboard for a mattress warehouse commercial. The mascot is a giant talking pillow. I hate it. Noon rolls around. I grab the cardigan. I drive the Subaru to the museum. It is an old stone building downtown. Huge pillars. Looks like a bank that would foreclose on a widow. I walk inside. The lobby echoes loudly. There is a giant desk with a security guard. He looks like he is 100 years old. He is reading a newspaper. I walk up. I say hi. I'm looking for Helene. She works in the archives. He slowly lowers the newspaper. He stares at me. He says, "Do you have an appointment?" I say no, I'm just bringing her sweater. She left it at my place. I immediately realize how that sounds. The guard raises an eyebrow. He says the archives are a restricted access. I say, can you just call down there and tell her Daniel is here? He sighs loudly. He picks up a heavy black desk phone. He dials a number. He waits. He says, "Helene, there is a young man here with your clothing." He hangs up. He points to a heavy wooden door near the elevators. He says she will come up those stairs. I stand near the door feeling like an idiot holding a brown cardigan. 5 minutes later, the door clicks open. Helene pokes her head out. She is wearing a white button-down shirt and has dust on her nose. She sees me and her face lights up. She steps out. She says, "Oh my God, I completely forgot my sweater." She says, "Thank you." We are standing awkwardly in the marble lobby. The security guard is definitely watching us. I say so. "Do you want to get lunch?" She says I can't. I have a massive backlog of Civil War shipping manifests to sort through. She says, "But I want to see you tonight." I say, "Okay, I can come over to your place." She suddenly looks panicked. She says, Actually my place is a disaster." She says my pipes burst last week, and my kitchen is currently covered in plastic tarps. She says, "Can we just go back to your place?" I say, "Yeah, absolutely, we can get takeout." She smiles. She says, "Perfect. I will see you at 6. She goes back down the stairs. I walk out to my car. I feel incredibly happy. I drive home. I check my mail. There is a weird official-looking envelope from the County Utility Division. I open it while walking up my steps. It is a notice of unpaid water and sewage bills. It is for my old apartment. The apartment I shared with Monique 2 years ago. The total is $480. The letter says the account is still in my name. It says if it is not paid within 5 days, it will be sent to collections and impact my credit. I stop on the steps. I stare at the paper. I remember moving out. I remember telling Monique she needed to switch the utilities to her name since she was staying. She said she would handle it. She said I was stressing her out by nagging her about paperwork. She obviously never handled it. She let it rack up and then probably moved out to live with the macro guy. I feel a spike of absolute rage. I go inside. I sit at my kitchen island. I dial the county utility number. I sit on hold for 45 minutes listening to terrible jazz music. Finally, a woman answers. She sounds exhausted. I explain the situation. I say I haven't lived there in 2 years. I can prove it. She says, "Sir, the account is in your name." She says it doesn't matter who physically flushed the toilet. She says, "If your name is on the account, you owe the money." I say, "But my ex was supposed to transfer it." The woman sighs. She says, "Sir, we do not adjudicate relationship disputes." She says, "You have to come down to the county office in person to file a dispute form." She says, "We are open until 4 p.m. I hang up. I scream into a pillow. It is 2 p.m. I grab my keys. I run out to my car. I turn the key. The Subaru clicks loudly. It does not start. I try again. Click, click. The battery is completely dead. I left a dome light on last night when we got out in the rain. I rest my forehead on the steering wheel. I want to cry. My phone buzzes. It is Helene. She says, "Hey, the archives flooded slightly, so they sent us home early. You want me to come over now?" I text her back. I say my car is dead, and I have an emergency utility bill situation from my horrible past that is about to ruin my credit. I hit send. I instantly regret it. I sound like a chaotic mess. I sound like a liability. My phone rings. It is Helene. I answer it. I say, "I am so sorry. I am a disaster. You should run away." She says, "Where do you need to go?" I say the county building downtown. She says, "I am in my car. I will be there in 10 minutes. She hangs up. 10 minutes later, a tiny blue hatchback pulls into my driveway. I run out with my folder of mail. I get in the passenger seat. She says, "Buckle up. We are doing admin." She drives aggressively. She cuts off a city bus. She says, "Nobody respects a hatchback. You have to take the space." We get to the county building. We find parking in a gloomy concrete garage. We walk into the building. It smells like floor wax and despair. There are fluorescent lights buzzing loudly. We pull a paper ticket from a red dispenser. My number is 84. The digital sign on the wall says, "Currently serving 41. We sit in hard plastic orange chairs bolted to the floor. I hold the folder in my lap. I look at the floor. I say, "I am incredibly embarrassed that you are here right now." I say, "We have known each other for exactly 1 day, and I am dragging you to municipal purgatory." I say because my ex-girlfriend, who is your cousin, didn't pay her water bill. Helene looks at me. She shifts in her plastic chair. She bumps her shoulder against mine. She says, "Daniel." She says, "Yesterday I told you my cousin faked a peanut allergy to get free wine." She says, "Today you are dealing with her financial fallout." She says, "We are bonded in blood and unpaid sewage fees." She says, "Plus, I brought snacks." She opens her purse and pulls out a crushed bag of pretzels. We sit there for 2 hours. We eat dry pretzels. We watch miserable people argue with clerks behind thick plexiglass. We play a game where we guess what utility everyone is there for. She says the guy in the camel jacket is definitely here for a trash violation. I say no. He looks like an illegal burn pile guy. We laugh quietly. Finally, they call 84. I walk up to window 3. The clerk is the same exhausted woman I talked to on the phone. I slide the notice under the glass. I explain again. She prints out a stack of forms. She says you need a copy of your new lease proving you moved out 2 years ago. She says you need a notarized affidavit. She says, "And you still have to pay the late fee today, or it goes to collections at midnight." I feel completely defeated. I pull out my credit card. I pay the $50 late fee to buy myself time. I take the huge stack of complicated forms. I walk away from the window feeling like I lost a fight. Helene is waiting by the door. She sees my face. She links her arm through mine. She says, "Okay, that sucked." She says, "Let's go get tacos and margaritas." She says margaritas fix bureaucracy. We drive to a terrible loud Mexican restaurant near my house. The tables have sticky vinyl covers. We order a pitcher of margaritas. She pours me a glass. We clink glasses. I say to surviving the county building. She says to surviving Monique. We drink. We start talking about everything else. We talk about our families. I tell her my parents live in Florida and call me twice a year to ask if I know how to fix their iPad. She tells me her parents live 2 towns over and are incredibly overbearing. She says her mom means well but treats everyone like they are made of glass. Suddenly my phone buzzes on the table. It is a text from Robert. It says, "Hey man, Miriam and I are at the hardware store near your place. Coming over to check on the sad ghost." I panic. I say, "Oh no." Helene says, "What?" I say my friend Robert and his wife Miriam are heading to my townhouse right now. I say Robert is the one who made me download Tinder. I say he is going to ask a million questions. Helene takes a sip of her margarita. She says, "Tell them to come here." I say, "Are you sure?" I say Miriam has 0 filter. She will interrogate you. Helene says, "Daniel, I catalog Civil War diaries for a living. I am not afraid of a wife named Miriam." I text Robert the address of the restaurant. 15 minutes later, Robert and Miriam walk in. Robert is a big guy with a beard wearing a flannel. Miriam is tiny and intensely energetic. They spot us. They walk over. Robert looks at Helene. Robert looks at me. His jaw physically drops. He points at me. He says, "You left your house." He says, "And you are sitting with a human woman." He says, "Who are you and what have you done with Daniel?" I say, "Sit down, Robert." Miriam aggressively slides into the booth next to Helene. Miriam immediately says, "Hi, I'm Miriam. Daniel is a very good boy, but he has been sad for a long time. Are you a nice person?" Robert groans and says, "Miriam, Jesus." Helene doesn't flinch. Helene says, "Hi Miriam, I'm Helene. I am a relatively nice person and I just helped Daniel navigate the county utility department." Miriam's eyes go wide. She says, "You did government paperwork with him on the second date." She says, "Robert, we need to buy them another pitcher." The night gets loud. Robert asks how we met. I say Tinder. Miriam asks what Helene does. Helene says archivist. Robert asks if we have any weird connections. I freeze. Helene freezes. We have not discussed how to handle the Monique information with other people. Robert and Miriam knew Monique. Robert and Miriam actively hated Monique. Miriam once threatened to throw Monique's phone in a river at a barbecue. I look at Helene. Helene looks at me. She gives me a tiny nod. I take a deep breath. I say so. I say there is a funny story about that. I explain the botanical garden. I explain the cousin conversation. I explain the reveal. Robert is sitting perfectly still holding a tortilla chip halfway to his mouth. Miriam has her hands clapped over her mouth. Robert gently sets the chip down. He says, wait. He says, wait a minute. He says you matched with the final boss's blood relative. I say yes. Miriam slams her hands on the table. She yells. I knew she had a family of victims. She grabs Helene's hand. She says, did she steal your clothes? Helene says she stole my prom dress and ruined the zipper. Miriam yells, I knew it. Miriam knocks over her water glass. Water goes everywhere. Robert starts throwing napkins at it. I start throwing napkins at it. Helene just laughs. She says it's fine. We are very good at cleaning up spilled water. She looks at me and winks. The dinner goes amazing. Miriam decides she would die for Helene. Robert pats me on the back so hard I almost choke on a churro. We leave the restaurant at 10 p.m. We get back to my townhouse. Robert and Miriam drive away honking their horn obnoxiously. Helene and I walk up to my front door. She says, your friends are intense. I say, I am so sorry. Miriam is a lot. She says, no, I like them. They are fiercely loyal to you. We go inside. I turn on the kitchen lights. She sets her purse on the counter. My phone buzzes in my pocket. I ignore it. It buzzes again. Helene's phone buzzes in her purse. She reaches in and looks at it. Her face drops. She says, it's my mom. She says, it's almost 11. Why is my mom calling? She answers it. She says, hi mom, is everything okay? I am standing near the sink listening. I hear a faint, shrill voice coming through the phone speaker. Helene pulls the phone away from her ear. She hits the speaker button. Her mom's voice fills my kitchen. Her mom is saying, Helene, what on earth is going on? Her mom is saying, I just got a very strange phone call from your Aunt Lorraine. Helene closes her eyes. She pinches the bridge of her nose. She says, what did Aunt Lorraine say, Mom? Her mom says, Lorraine says, Monique called her, crying hysterically. Her mom says, Monique says you were dating her abusive ex-boyfriend to spite her. The silence in the kitchen is absolute. The refrigerator hums loudly. I feel the blood drain from my face. Abusive. Monique called me abusive. The floor feels like it is tilting. Helene's eyes snap open. She looks at me. She sees my face. She says into the phone, Mom, stop. Her mom keeps going. Her mom says, Monique says he was controlling and wouldn't let her see her friends. Her mom says Monique says you are doing this because you have always been jealous of her. Helene yells, Mom. I said stop. Her voice is loud and sharp. It startles me. The phone goes quiet. Helene says, Mom, listen to me very carefully. Helene says, Aunt Lorraine is a gossip, and Monique is a chronic liar. Helene says, Monique treated Daniel like garbage for 3 years, and now she is spinning a narrative because she realized she doesn't have him as a backup plan anymore. Her mom stammers. Her mom says, but Helene, she was crying. Helene says, yes. Ma Monique cries when it rains on a Tuesday. Helene says, I am hanging up now. We will talk about this tomorrow when you are not repeating Aunt Lorraine's nonsense. Helene hangs up the phone. She throws the phone on the counter. It clatters loudly. She turns to me. She walks over to me. I am leaning against the sink, gripping the edge of the counter. My knuckles are white. My chest is tight. I say I wasn't abusive. My voice is shaking. I say, I swear to God, Helene, I never stopped her from seeing anyone. I just asked her not to take my car without telling me. I say I paid her rent. I say I bought her groceries. I say I wasn't. Helene steps right into my space. She grabs both of my arms. Her grip is shockingly strong. She looks directly into my eyes. She says, Daniel? She says, stop. She says, I know. She says, I know exactly who she is, and I know exactly who you are. She says you let me sleep on your terrible couch because it was raining. She says you apologized for spilling water. She says you spent 2 hours in a municipal building today to pay a bill she abandoned. She says you are not the villain in this story. She says she is just flailing because you finally closed the door. She steps closer and wraps her arms around me. She hugs me tight. She buries her face in my chest. I slowly wrap my arms around her. I bury my face in her hair. My hands are shaking. I hold on to her like a raft. We stand in the kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator stops humming. The house is completely quiet. I take a deep, shaky breath. The tightness in my chest finally breaks. It breaks completely. I feel a tear slide down my cheek. I don't try to hide it. I just hold her. Eventually, she pulls back. She looks up at me. She wipes my cheek with her thumb. She tries to smile. She says, "Well, Thanksgiving is going to be absolutely radioactive." I let out a choked laugh. I say we don't have to go. I say we can just stay here and eat the rest of the baked ziti. She shakes her head. She says no. She says we are going. She says we are going to walk into my aunt's house holding hands. She says we are going to bring a very dry, very terrible store-bought pie. She says, and we are going to sit at the table and watch Monique short circuit. I stare at her. She is wearing my old t-shirt. Her glasses are crooked. She looks terrifyingly determined. I say you are entirely too brave for me. She says no. I am just extremely petty when it comes to historical wrongs. She steps back. She picks up her phone. She says, I am going to text my mom and tell her to put us down for a +1. She starts typing furiously. I watch her. I look around my kitchen. There are empty grocery bags on the counter. There is a stack of utility paperwork next to the sink. There is a wet spot on the floor we missed. My life is suddenly incredibly messy. It is full of loud friends and angry aunts and bureaucratic nightmares. And I don't want to go back to the quiet padded room. I don't want the dead stick in the dirt anymore. I walk over to the trash can. I pull the dead ficus pot out of the corner. I carry it to the door. I set it outside on the porch. Helene looks up from her phone. She says, "What are you doing?" I say, "Clearing space." I walk back over to her. She puts her phone down. She smiles. She points to the couch. She says, "Are we watching another terrible movie?" I say, "Yes, we are watching the sequel to the bus bomb movie." We sit on the couch. She pulls the quilt over us. She leans her head on my shoulder. I hit play on the remote. I put the remote down on the coffee table.